Hi, my name is Carrie McLaughlin. I'm council staff at the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council, and I'm going to walk you through an overview of the scoping topics for king mackerel. These are changes in allocations, the stock boundary and sale provisions for Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic migratory groups of king mackerel. This will go into Amendment 26. That's a joint amendment with the Gulf of Mexico and South Atlantic Council. So a little bit about the federal fisheries regulatory process. Starting at the bottom of the screen, the council gets input from council staff, information from stock assessments, and the scientific advisors to the council, the Scientific and Statistical Committee, and then also our advisory panels and public comment. They go to the council, and the council identifies issues they need to address and develops fishery management plans and amendments to those plans. Once they go through the public hearing process and make a decision, the council submits the fishery management plan and amendments to the National Marine Fisheries Service and Secretary of Commerce. They review the amendments and implement the federal fishing regulations. So for this amendment, the South Atlantic Council approved these items for scoping in December 2014, and the scoping meetings are being held now, and we have a comment period. And then in March 2015, the South Atlantic Council will discuss and review the public input, and we'll get started on development of Amendment 26. So both the Gulf and South Atlantic Councils are interested in the public input for several actions for king mackerel. They want to update the annual catch limits, the ACLs, for Gulf and Atlantic king mackerel, modify the stock boundary between Gulf and Atlantic stocks, modify the sector allocations and commercial zone allocations for Gulf king mackerel, and consider allowing sale of Atlantic king mackerel caught in the drift gill nets in the small coastal shark fishery, and then management options for the Florida East Coast subzone. I do want to note that we did scope some items last January 2014, about separating the commercial permits for king and Spanish mackerel, and those were going to go into an Amendment 26 also, but we've moved those actions to a future amendment. Right now, the council just wants to hear your thoughts and your ideas on actions for king mackerel while they're deciding what actions they want to put in the amendment. And they'll review that input in March and decide how to proceed. In Amendment 26, they would like your input on factors to consider when updating the Atlantic king mackerel annual catch limit, modifying that stock boundary, what to look at for sector and commercial zone allocations for Gulf king mackerel, your input on allowing sale of Atlantic king mackerel bycatch and the gillnet shark fishery, and management ideas to address effort in the Florida East Coast subzone. So first we'll look at Atlantic king mackerel annual catch limit, the ACL. In August 2014, there was a stock assessment for both Gulf and Atlantic king mackerel completed. And then in October 2014, the scientific advisors to the South Atlantic Council, the SSC, reviewed that stock assessment and made recommendations for different levels of acceptable biological catch, what we call ABCs. And I have these in this table below. And this is what the council would use to decide how to set the annual catch limit. So a little more detail about this. We have the OFL, the overfishing limit. So this is these are in millions of pounds, so 22.0581 million pounds. And as long as catch is under that, the stock would not be considered to be undergoing overfishing. Then the SSC looked at a couple different ways to set that ABC level. And these are high, medium, and low. And these three are based on different levels of recruitment, which is the number of fish entering the population, because king mackerel is a very dynamic stock. And so they wanted to be able to look at what the council could use to set the annual catch limit based on if those levels of recruitment change just from different factors that affect the fish. So this would be, the high would be a high level of recruitment, a lot of reproduction and fish that enter the population, medium, and then low. The next two are deterministic equilibrium yields, and this takes the spawning potential ratio, which is how many fish that are needed to replenish the stock to make up for what was removed from fishing. And it is basically a proxy for the MSY, the maximum sustainable yield. And so what this is going to do is set the annual the ABC, which the councils could set that annual catch limit at kind of a constant level for the next 5 years. So this would be 12.7 million pounds for the next 5 years. This next one is the same thing, except there's a buffer where you would only use 75% of that, and that would just be to make up for any uncertainty or changes in the stock, just to make sure that it doesn't go over it won't go over more than what the fish can handle, and that would also be set to stay the same for 5 or 6 years. The same thing for the Gulf King Mackerel ACL. They were in that stock assessment that was finished in August 2014, and then in January 2015, the Gulf SSC reviewed and made the recommendations for the ABCs, and those are shown here, and they used a different method. The Gulf Council may consider setting that ACL at the same level as ABC, so it would be 9.62 million pounds the first year, and these the following years, but the council may also consider other options such as a constant catch scenario. The next item the council is scoping is the king mackerel stock boundary. So in the stock assessment, CDAR 38, they considered a different boundary between the Gulf and Atlantic stocks, and it was different from the management stocks. So these show the current stock boundaries for king mackerel. So April 1st through October 31st. The Atlantic group goes all the way around and includes the Florida Keys. But then in the winter, starting November 1st through March 31st, the boundary shifts up to the Flagler-Volusia County line in Florida, and almost the whole east coast of Florida is fishing on the Gulf stock. But in the stock assessment, there was a different stock boundary used. And what it did was, instead of that, the area where it shifted on the east coast, called the mixing zone, they designated the smaller area around the Keys the mixing zone. Next would be the Gulf King Mackerel commercial zone allocations. So the Gulf Council would need to update their commercial zone allocations when they update their Gulf King Mackerel ACL. And the way this is going to change because of that, the change in the stock boundary is that there is an allocation to the Florida East Coast of the Gulf King Mackerel ACL. But after that stock boundary changes, then they won't need to allocate any of the Gulf ACL to that. That will be a part of the Atlantic King Mackerel ACL. So these are the current allocation of the commercial Gulf King Mackerel ACL that each of the zones and subzones gets. And then they're considering a couple different ways to look at it: an equal reallocation, in which all the Gulf zones would get an equal portion of what this Florida East Coast proportion was, 7.98%. They would all get a bump in 7.98%. And then a proportional reallocation, in which all the zones and subzones would get a little more, but it would be based on how much they already have. So looking at what the pounds would look like if the ACL is based on those ABCs from Table 2, this is what the commercial ACL would look like, and then the percentage of the western zone, and then the eastern zone subzones. And then here at the bottom I do have the current quotas. So all of these would increase, all of the percentages of the ACL would increase, and then all of the actual poundage would increase. This one shows the potential commercial ACLs if the zone allocations were adjusted based on the proportional increases. So everybody's proportion would go up, but only by a certain percentage. And it's the same thing when compared to those current zone quotas. it would be an increase. The Gulf Council is also considering changes to the recreational and commercial allocations for Gulf king mackerel. Showing this table shows the percentage of the sector ACL landed, and then there have been a few years where the commercial ACL has been exceeded, but the recreational ACL has not been used. And then in this one, we show the total ACL landed. So the Gulf Council is considering maybe reallocating to avoid the commercial ACL being exceeded. And then if the Gulf Council did want to change the recreational and commercial allocation, they may want to look at the percentage of the total landings, the catch ratio, to set those. The South Atlantic Council is also considering allowing sale of king mackerel bycatch in the shark gillnet fishery. So a recent amendment, Amendment 28, prohibited bag limit sales of king and Spanish mackerel in the South Atlantic. But the Council wants to consider letting fishermen who are in the small coastal shark fishery who use drift gill nets to sell king mackerel that they catch under the bag limit. Prior to this, these fishermen who have both federal commercial shark permits and their commercial king mackerel permits would sell small numbers of king mackerel that were caught on their shark gill net trips. But gill nets is not, drift gill net is not an authorized gear for king mackerel, so they can't be sold under their federal king mackerel commercial permit. So right now the king mackerel are being discarded, and the Council would like to consider some way to let them sell those. Last, the Council wants public input on ways to address concerns about commercial effort in the Florida East Coast subzone. And what the area we're talking about is from the Flagler-Volusia line to the Dade-Monroe line. And these measures could include a subquota of that Atlantic king mackerel ACL just for that subzone, an endorsement program to fish in the Florida East Coast subzone, maybe some specific accountability measures, and any others. Some questions that the Council would like to look into: should the Florida East Coast subzone stay that same area that you can see in the map, or can it be expanded or made into a smaller area? Should it exist all year or just a part of the year? Currently, this only exists in the winter as part of the Gulf group, the Gulf king mackerel. Should there be a subquota just for that Florida East Coast subzone that's designated? And what this would do is that when that subquota is met, then that area would be closed. An endorsement program to fish in the Florida East Coast subzone. And then, are the trip limits still appropriate in the subzone and also in the area north of that to the North Carolina-South Carolina border? So you can attend the scoping meeting that is on January 21st in Cocoa Beach. And then we are also doing a scoping webinar on February 4th at 6 p.m. And you can register at our website, safmc.net, under Public Hearings and Scoping Meetings tab. You can also submit written comments by mail or by email or fax. And all of this information is available online at our website. And if you need any more information about this, you can contact me, Carrie McLaughlin, at the office number or email, and the general questions to Amber Von Harten and Kim Iverson. Thank you.